Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have my May wrap up. So the month of May was okay for me. I mean, I did read 9 books, so it was good. Like, it was a good reading month. However, based on the quantity of pages read, it was my second worst month, the worst one being January. The beginning of the month went really well, but if you've seen my most recent vlog, you will know that the last week of May was very stressful for me, and because of that I was very unmotivated to read, and I feel like the whole of May feels a lot worse than it was just because of that one week. So the month of May was actually pretty good. I did read a couple of books for the Asian Readathon. As well as that, I also participated in Bingoathon, and then of course we have my Bookopoly TBR series, and I did read most of the books for that as well. So because I anticipated that I would read a significant amount of books and I don't know how to stop talking, I have already done a mid-month wrap-up that covers these 4 books, which are Gossip Girl by Cecily von Ziegler, Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire, Always and Forever Lara Jean by Jenny Han, and Children of the Whales by Abby Umeda. So if you would like to see a review of these 4 books, which I will not be covering in this video, then I will put the link up here for you to go check that out. So in the remainder of this video, I will be reviewing the 5 books that I read in the second half of May, but first let us do the stats. So in the month of May, I read 2,927 pages, which breaks down to an average of 97.5 pages per day. For my star ratings, we had 3 3 stars, 2 4 stars, and 4 5 stars, and this breaks down to an average of 4.1 stars per book, which is pretty decent. For the demographics, I read 5 adult books and 4 young adult. For the formats, we have 7 standard novels, 1 manga, and 1 ebook. For the genres, I read 4 fantasies, 2 contemporaries, 1 thriller, 1 science fiction, and 1 historical fiction. And lastly, the places that I sourced these books, 4 of them were from my TBR that existed pre-2019, 2 were library books, 2 I've hauled in 2019, and 1 was an ebook that I read on Scribd. So those were my stats for the month of May, and now let's get into the reviews. So the first book I finished, I was reading throughout the first half of May as well. I just finished it in the second half, and that was Storm of Swords Part 1, Steel and Snow by George R.R. Martin. I read this as Storm of Swords is the book for May and June for the Catch Up Book Club, which is a book club that I created, and throughout this year we are reading the entire A Song of Ice and Fire series. As the UK editions are split into 2 parts, I read the first half of Storm of Swords in May, and I will be reading the second half in June. I don't normally go into a synopsis of Game of Thrones as it is so well known and so well loved. However, recently I did receive a comment on one of my videos that asked what Game of Thrones was about, and so for this wrap up I will give you as brief a synopsis as I can because there's a lot going on in these books. So Storm of Swords in particular is the 3rd installment in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, but the best way that I can try to describe Game of Thrones is to say that it takes place in the Kingdom of Westeros, which is comprised of 7 kingdoms that have been united and are now ruled by just 1 king. Now this story starts when the king visits his best friend Ned Stark, and this is following the death of the Hand of the King. Now the Hand of the King is the advisor to the king and the person who makes most of the decisions, and he visits his best friend to ask him to be the new Hand of the King. Now there are quite a few people who believe that the old Hand was actually murdered and didn't die of natural causes as it appeared, but there is no proof of this. Now Ned Stark, being the man of high honour that he is, takes it upon himself to dive into the reason why the old Hand of the King may have been murdered, and that sets off a whole chain of events. This is a multi-perspective high fantasy. It spans many perspectives across the series. We're even getting new perspectives coming in now, and this particular installment is very high action. A lot of things happened in this one and I absolutely loved it. If you guys have been here for at least a couple of months, you will know that I gave Clash of Kings 4 stars, and I gave this first half of Storm of Swords 5 stars. It was absolutely mind-blowing. I think the first book is a really good setup for the characters and the world and what is going to happen in this series, and then the second book is very slow and political. However, this one is the complete opposite. It is so action-packed. There is so much that happens. I'm pretty sure that every single character that has a perspective, or every single character that we have experienced in the show who we know as a main character, even though we don't get their perspective, something very significant happens to them throughout the course of the 2 parts of this book combined. A lot happened just in this first part, so the second part I know some of the things that happen and it's real intense, so I'm really excited to get to that one. But I definitely thought that this was very compelling, very high action, and it was pretty much everything that I love about Game of Thrones. So this was 100% an easy 5-star rating for me. Even though these books are pretty chunky, I never felt bored while reading this one while I slogged slogged through Clash of Kings quite a bit, and I'm definitely glad about that because both parts of this book combined make over 1,000 pages. So if it was as slow as Clash of Kings, I would have had a real struggle on my hands here. The next book that I read was a buddy read with Jade from Jade Reads, and that was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This was a reread for me. Jade was reading it for the first time. We've decided to buddy read this as she owns all of the books in the Grishaverse and has not started them yet, and I really want to reread them so that I can read Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom and King of Scars, which I haven't read yet. So this is the book that started the Grishaverse. This is Leigh Bardugo's debut novel. It's a young adult fantasy that is set in a Russian inspired world. I have been told by one of my subscribers that this book series is an insult to Russian culture, and honestly I'm not too surprised about that because I remember the first time that I read it and there are quite a few words in here that seem to be Russian, but they are also inspired by Russian as far as I can tell, because I remember googling them the first time around and not really getting any direct translations. If you're looking for good representation in a Russian fantasy, then this is probably not it. But this story follows our main character Alina, who lives in the country of Ravka. This is a country that is constantly at war. You have I think the first army are the Grisha army, and these are people with powerful magical abilities of varying types, and you also have the second army, which are just your typical human foot soldiers. Alina is in the second army at the beginning of this novel, and she is a cartographer, so she makes maps. And one of the distinguishing features of this world is that there is something called the Fold that crosses it, which is an area of immense darkness where monsters live. One day when they are crossing the Fold, Alina realizes that she has some pretty powerful abilities that she did not know that she had, and because of that she is taken to the Grisha Academy where she lives and trains alongside them, and essentially she experiences this whole world of luxury that was never available to her before, and some things happen. Now I gave this 4 stars, which is my original rating from the first time I read this in, I believe, 2015, and I definitely enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. When I read this the first time around, I had just read Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, and I always thought that that series was better than this one. But aside from the fact that I just generally really like Red Queen, my argument for preferring it is that at the time that was the first young adult high fantasy type story that I had ever read, and it opened up this new world to me. So even if 10 years I reread Red Queen and it is absolute trash and I hate it, that will still be the first young adult high fantasy that I read, and I will always love it for that. So because of that comparison I'd made in my head, and I'd always thought that Red Queen was better, over the years I'd assumed that this was terribly written, it was incredibly tropey, which it kind of is, but it was written in 2012, and that it was generally a shit show from start to finish. However, what I discovered when I started reading this is that I actually really like Leigh Bardugo's writing style, and it was just the comparison and my own brain that had made it seem so much worse than it actually is. Now the reason that this book and this series will not get 5 stars from me is because it's kind of light on the character development and the plot front. There are quite a few conveniences, including one specific character that only pops up when the main character really needs him, and he's kind of just like roaming around the world at any other time. I do really like the Darkling. I love the Darkling's backstory, and when you find out some things about him, I absolutely love it. I'm not like a Darkling and Alina stan, and I never have been. I do find the Darkling attractive in that charismatic, brooding, dark persona that he has, but Alina and the Darkling, no. It's kind of, you know, like how you find bad boys attractive, but you know that they're bad boys, so you stay away. That's the kind of way that I find the Darkling attractive. But overall, even though this was kind of tropey and young adult fantasy has come a long way since this book was published, I still thought it was really good. It was compelling, I enjoyed it, and I'm excited to continue with the series because in the next book that I'm also buddy reading with Jade in June, my favourite character is introduced, and I am so ready for that. I then read the group book for Bingo-a-thon, which was Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. Now this is a young adult science fiction gender bent retelling of the Knights of the Round Table, or the Legend of Arthur. Now I personally really love Arthurian legend, and my love for Arthurian legend was kicked off by Avalon High by Meg Cabot back in the day when I was a teenager. So I was really excited to read this, and I was kind of disappointed by it, but when I got a little bit into this book I kind of just took it for what it was, and I don't think too badly about this book. So the plot of this is that we follow Ari, who is the 42nd reincarnation of King Arthur, and alongside Ari we also follow Merlin, who since the days of the original Arthur has been aging backwards, and every time an Arthur is reincarnated he's brought back from this deep sleep, and every time he wakes up he's significantly younger than he was. Now Merlin's goal is to find the newest reincarnation of Arthur, train them, get them to complete the cycle, so unite humanity and do whatever comes after that that the original Arthur never got to complete because he was murdered by his son, and then they will be able to not only complete the cycle but also break whatever spell is binding Merlin into this body that keeps aging backwards. Now, this is one of those books that is intensely plot driven, so you don't get a whole lot of character development throughout here, but it's also one of those books that is just fun. I don't think it's supposed to be this amazing literary masterpiece. I think that this is just a fun read. There are a lot of things that are very convenient in here, and there is a lot of very cheesy humor. There's a lot of really weird sexual references. Like, sometimes it kind of feels like I'm in the mind of a teenage boy, the way that sexual references are just kind of thrown in and they don't feel natural or anything. Like, I'm not a prude, I don't mind sexual references, it's just the way that they were thrown in, it felt like they were thrown in for the sake of it and they weren't natural, so they weren't all that funny, and that threw me off a little bit. Like I said, the plot is convenient. Sometimes it's so fast paced that I had to keep rereading bits because I wasn't really sure what was going on, but at its core it was fun. I did kind of like Merlin. There were a few plot points in here that I was really interested to see how they would turn out, and as well as that, this book is extremely diverse. Now, when I was looking into this book, I discovered that Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy are engaged, and Corey McCarthy is a non-binary trans person, and the diversity in this book definitely reflects the representation of the authors themselves. We have non-binary characters that are called fluid, which means that they're gender fluid, and I liked how they were just existing in the world like it was no big deal. There were just gender fluid people around, and that is obviously the diversity that we want to see in the world today. We want it to be no big deal, no matter what gender you are or orientation. It's nothing to go crazy about. So I did like that representation in here. As well as that, most of the relationships in this are same sex. There is definitely a male-male romance and a female-female romance, and although it isn't confirmed for every single one of the kind of main cast of characters, I'm pretty sure that the sort of social norm in this world is that everybody's sexuality is fluid. So whoever you're attracted to, it's cool. You don't need to declare yourself as any particular sexuality, which is something else that I liked. So I'm not sure if I mentioned, but I gave this 3 stars. I kind of just took it for what it was at the end. I'm not going to rate this too critically. For quality of novel, it would probably be around a 2 for like writing style, plot development, character development, things like that. But for the extra added enjoyment and that it was just kind of a fun ride and I enjoyed my time reading it, I give this book 3 stars. Now for the book that I read on Scribd, that was Hidden Bodies by Caroline Kepnes. This is the second book in the You series, which is not a duology. Now I have discovered that she is writing more books in the series. I did originally think it was a duology because I think there's 2 years between You and Hidden Bodies, and by that time scale then the 3rd book should have been out last year. It wasn't, but I do believe that there will be 2 more books in this series, which I'm really excited about. So I gave this book 5 stars. Can't really tell you much about the plot of the second book. I normally do give like a little hint of what the sequel is about, like what direction it goes in, but I can't really do that for this because it would kind of spoil the ending for the first book. So the synopsis of the first book is that we are in the mind of our main character, Joe, who works at a bookstore when a girl called Guinevere Beck comes in. He quickly becomes infatuated with her and obsessed with her, and he starts to stalk her, and it is about their relationship and the things that he does for the woman he loves. I gave that book 5 stars as well. I absolutely loved it. It was just so fascinating, and I loved the unique perspective of being in the mind of Joe, because while he's doing bad things, you root for him because you're inside his head. And the second person perspective writing style was really unique for me. It was a new experience, and I found that I really liked it in this context. So Hidden Bodies is quite different. We have a whole new set of obstacles for Joe, and as well as that, it is written in first person, so you are fully inside his head. He's not talking to you as he is in the first book. Now, I thought that this one was very interesting, but I also thought it was less believable than the first book. The situations that Joe finds himself in this one are a little bit more of a higher scale than they are in the first book, and I thought it was just like a little bit of a reach of some of the things that he did. As well as that, there is a plot twist, and I couldn't decide how I felt about it. The character in question reacted in a really strange way, not how I expected they would react, and I'm not sure how I feel about that because I don't feel like anybody would react that way in that situation, but at the same time I'm glad that they did. So I don't know, but I did still really enjoy this because it was a little bit less realistic. I do definitely prefer the first book, but it ended on a cliffhanger, and I will always read books in this series because it is so fascinating. It's kind of similar to watching something like the Ted Bundy tapes. It's kind of that vibe of getting the first-hand perspective of somebody who is doing this, so like true crime, but from the perspective of the criminal. And I just find it so fascinating, and I absolutely love this series. And now for the final book that I read in May, and this is one that you've all been waiting for. I actually finished this at about 11:53 p.m. on the last day of May, so I just got it in there, but that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So I know that this is one of your guys' most favorite books. Like, everybody loves this and everybody told me it was amazing. The plot of this is that we follow Patroclus, who in the original myth of Achilles is his companion, it's his best friend, and Madeline Miller has reworked that into a male-male romance. And so we start off following Patroclus in his early childhood. He is a prince. I can't remember who his father is, but essentially he has an argument with a boy one day where the boy wants to take his toy and Patroclus doesn't want to give it to him, and they tussle and the other boy dies. And because of that, Patroclus is banished to the place where Achilles is the prince, and they quickly become friends, and it evolves over time into something more. Now, I gave this 4 stars. And the reason for that is that while I really enjoyed this book, I felt like there was a big disconnect between me and Patroclus. And obviously this book is called The Song of Achilles, and Achilles is the hero in this story, Patroclus is not. So obviously we are following Achilles' life from the lens of somebody who is very close to him. However, I felt like Patroclus was a very passive character. The writing style of this is very atmospheric. I feel like it's kind of true to the way that myths are normally written, but it is embellished a little bit. I found that there was a lot of description of things and metaphorical kind of descriptions, but I don't feel like I ever knew how Patroclus was feeling up until the very end when all the shit starts to unfold. I thought that Patroclus was a very passive character as well, because anything that happened to him, he never reacted to. Any decision that Achilles made that he didn't agree with, Patroclus would maybe tell him not to do it, but he would never sit down and be like, look, I feel like you shouldn't do this because of this, or this makes me feel like this. No matter what, he would just let Achilles just go do what he wanted. There were moments where people approached him like provocatively and came onto him, and he was just kind of like, yeah, okay, why not? And a lot of the time he didn't enjoy it, he didn't want it, but he just kind of let it happen. And I just felt like his role in this story was very passive. The romance between them was very beautiful. The ending broke me, but the first 290 pages of the story I felt were very meandering, and it got to a point where the story just kind of plateaued and not a lot really happened. Like, there were things happening, but it was just kind of like another day in the life of what they were doing. A big event would happen, but it was kind of, you know, just like another brick in the wall, no big deal. And throughout the middle, it was difficult for me to find the motivation to pick this back up. However, as we know, Achilles had many prophecies surrounding him, and we know going into this that things are not really going to turn out all that great for Achilles. And then throughout the book we have more and more prophecies that are added on, and I did not see the plot twist come in. I will say that I did not see the plot twist. And then all of the prophecies started to resolve at once, and that bit I absolutely loved. The last 60 pages of this I thought were absolutely phenomenal. It's just my disconnect with Patroclus and the way that I felt that the plot meandered throughout the beginning means that I only give this 4 stars instead of 5. But the ending of this story will stay with me forever because it was so beautiful, and I was a little bit heartbroken, I can't lie. So those were all of the books that I finished in May. For those of you who follow Bookopoly quite closely, you may realise that I did not mention the Queens of Leah here. I am 200 pages into this. I'm not going to go too much into it now, but this is a King Lear retelling, and it follows 3 princesses who are waiting for their father to decide which one of them is going to be the heir to the kingdom. This writing style is absolutely beautiful. When I read the first few chapters of this, I was pretty convinced that it was going to be my new favourite book because of how beautiful the writing style is. It's like purple and flowery, think like Laini Taylor. And the characters reminded me a little bit of some Sarah J Maas characters, so I was real into that. However, just with how busy I was in the last week of May, combined with the fact that I'm 200 pages into this and not a lot has happened, meant that I have not picked it up in a little while. It's very dense, it's quite slow moving, and so while I've been so busy and I've been on the move a lot, I decided to pursue a book that was a lot easier for me to just dive in for one chapter. But I'm definitely carrying this over into June, and I will bring you a review of this in my June wrap up or my mid-June wrap up. So that is it for my May wrap up. Please let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. Please also don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go and nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.